It's not amazed that the DA will oppose the bill because it will not serve the interest of white supremacy and white interest. It won't serve them. So it's obvious that they will oppose this bill. This bill, Honorable Deputy Speaker, it's a lifeline for a black person that is over-indebted by their capitalist behavior from Britain and all of that. So it's a lifeline for them that we will give to our black people out there that are over-indebted, and that they put and continuously giving them, continuously putting them into loans. The National Credit Amendment before the National Assembly seeks to give relief to workers who earn 7.5 thousand and below who are heavily over-indebted. The EFF welcome and support the bill, and even if the bill is only scratching the surface of highly indebted society workers are under so much pressure, any relief, however how little, will make a difference. While we support the bill, we are of the view that the committee have failed to use this opportunity presented by the bill to change what fundamentally is a structural problem entrenched in the exploitative banking system that the DA protects. When we went to Britain on a study tour as the committee, we learned in Britain that the credit market have taken active responsibility for they have put in their society into over-indebtedness. They have taken full responsibility, and the credit market have helped government as well so that the society can get out of indebted. But the DA don't want our black people to be indebted. More money from default charges, hiking interest because of defaults and loan books, which simply cannot be recovered. When African Bank collapsed, we thought it was going to be a lesson for both government credit regulators and prudential authorities. They ignorantly refused to take either lessons or responsibilities. Instead, they want to pretend like African Bank did not collapse because of their reckless lending, poor oversight, and greed. We have another African bank waiting to happen in Capitec. They paradigm themselves as a bank, but all they are is nothing but a mashonisa. Even if it's the office in the fancy office in Stellenbosch suburbs, Capitec is still a loan shark, defended and protected by credited, regulated, the Reserve Bank, and even National Treasury. The conduct of Capitec is reckless, destructive, and will make efforts of legislation redundant. They will continue to give heavily indebted consumers multiple loans, including more than a loan in a month. Instead of extending banking service to our workers and poor people in the edges of societies, banks like Capitec exploit customers with higher interest rates. Until we deal with the greedy banks, workers will continue to be exposed and the loan sharks and mashonishis shenanigans. We fully support this, and we will support it, and the DA can go and report it at Stellenbosch.
IFP.
The bad news for the economy is that South Africa's growth over the years has hinged largely on spending, and because consumers are continuously driven in this current financial climate by feelings of anxiety about their ability to make ends meet, they are driven even more to desperate measures, especially in securing of more debt, which we all know is even more expensive in the process, more expensive money, that is. At first blush, the purpose of this draft bill seemed innocuous enough, a mechanism aimed at assisting consumers. But in reality, this proposed legislation, which in the face of it appears to assist over-indebted consumers, may prove to be a double-edged sword, and that it could in fact discourage consumers from managing their own credit responsibility. Excuse me. We can pretend or try to say that this bill does not provide for debts to be extinguished, but this is exactly what it seeks to achieve. Chairperson, South Africa are the highest borrowers in the world. Statistics shows that more than 10 million South Africans are in severe arrears on their existing debt. This bill will only result in credit providers restricting credit to populations where stability of repayment cannot be guaranteed, and in a result in the lower income population seeking to obtain credit through informal channels, exactly what we are trying to prevent. And that's where legislation does not provide sufficient or practical consumer protection. A proper impact study was never really conducted on the effects of financial institutions and the acceleration of irresponsible borrowing. How will all our already cash-strapped treasury assist financial institutions where there are massive defaults on loans? Where's this money going to come from? It's estimated that this could cost as much as 20 billion rand. Our financial institutions are already heavily overregulated and the bureaucratic burden grows every year. And now further new rules will be implemented in banks in this country, forcing them to build in defenses even before a loan is on default, which is not only going to affect the financial institution's capital reserves, but it will make it also difficult for anybody else to get a loan. It's become a matter of survival for the poor, which will not be good for the economy and the country as a whole. The IFP has given this serious consideration, and in this format, we just cannot support it.
The National Credit Amendment Bill tabled here today seeks to provide greater protection and debt relief to consumers who are not adequately provided for in the existing statutory sequestration, administration, and debt review processes. In the main, this particularly benefits creditors. Debt relief is clearly counterproductive as the term is extended. Monthly payments are reduced and the amount paid is extended over a long period, resulting in consumers paying, some of them all their lives, not forgetting the amount deducted by debt relief agencies as their own cost to render such services. Honorable Chair, Deputy Speaker, most of these consumers from poor households, which simply means that the lives of this category of consumers will only degenerate and never improve. Banks, financial institutions, loan sharks are ruthless and reckless because they're in the business of making money. And I think that is evident by the fact that the 4 major banks in South Africa just declared over 40 billion rand in profits for the last financial year. That will tell you how they are sucking the blood out of the bones of the poorest of the poor in the South African. Out of the bone, that's basically what they are actually doing. The other challenge that we seem to have is this, where we find ourselves with a lot of these illegal money lenders, loan sharks who hold the bank cards, the IDs, and recklessly lending our people. And you'll find in many of these businesses, on just the day after the all pay, when people get their social assistance, you'll find queues of people lining up there because their cards, their bank cards, their IDs are held by these people. And by the time they finish paying with the interest, there's very little left. The other problem you seem to have is this, that they are so over indebted that the amounts that are deducted from their salaries, a major portion of it is going towards loans. So it's really not helping the situation. We welcome although we are concerned about extinguishing debt, but we welcome it on the basis that it might deter financial institutions and these illegal loan sharks from being reckless in terms of lending to the poorest of the poor. So this will also prevent more and more illegal loan sharks mushrooming as they are at this point in time. The National Freedom Party believes that this will actually restrict money lenders, it will benefit the poorest of the poor, it will stop the poorest of the poor taking advantage of these ads and advertising by businesses in wanting to give them. And what is happening is this, which is very, very important. These credit bureaus are selling the personal information to these banking institutions and others, and they are sending out messages encouraging people. The National Freedom Party will support the amendment of this.
Thank you.
I'm not going to spend too much time telling you about the extent of our economic crisis. I think we all know it. It's the fact that less than 10 million South Africans, just under 10 million South Africans, cannot find work. It's the fact that per capita income has been dropping for the last number of years. It's that our debt is now all over 3 trillion rand. And ultimately, we now face the threat of a sovereign rating downgrade. Anyone who denies the fact that South Africa is in crisis should actually not have the right to come and stand here and debate this issue. Because ultimately, Parliament must ask itself this one question: how did we end up here, and what should we do to fix it? One analyst this week described the situation as death by 1,000 cuts, referring to the many factors that together have come to paralyze our growth and bleed our fiscus dry. And this is largely true. And honorable members, perhaps many of us would know that yes, corruption has cost us as much as 100 billion rands. Many of us would know that there's a crisis at SARS that has led to huge undercollection of around 50 billion rands. Many of us know that we depend on serious bailouts to state-owned enterprises that continue to divert billions and billions of rands away from this crucial budget. Many of us know that, yes, we have an ever-expanding public sector wage bill, and a massive cabinet brought to us proudly by the ANC. And many of us know that, in fact, it's populist policies like expropriation without compensation, the nationalization of the Reserve Bank, and the proposed NHI, which has been a recipe for disaster. But I think the one thing we should never shy away from, which I find that too many analysts have stopped speaking about, is what is the real problem? What is the core of our problems with our recession, and who should take responsibility for it? Honorable member, this crisis has been brought on to South Africa squarely and fairly by the African National Congress.